Welcome everyone. My name is Kapil Nakra and I'm one of the co-founders of digitalvidya. Today we have a very interesting session for all of you. The title of today's session is the third wave of e-commerce global insights. In India, the e-commerce has traveled a long distance from the earlier successes of air ticketing as well as railway ticketing to the current buzz around vertical specific marketplaces. Today's session is about the next wave of e-commerce, which will require innovation around customer experiences, merchandising, and marketing. And to lead this session, we have with us Alok Mittal, who is a managing director at Canaan Partners. Alok is actually among the very few and among the key people who are shaping up India's entrepreneurial ecosystem. He's also a co-founder of Indian Angel Network. He's on the board of TIE. He's also an advisor to Adtech, and he's currently on the board of companies like BharatMatrimony, IndiaProperty, iYogi, mCarbon, UnitedLex, CarTrade, and Happiest Minds. Personally, I'm an entrepreneur, and every time if I'm starting something new, the person that I look for is Alok to bounce my ideas. So really want to thank Alok for taking time out today. So before taking any further time, I'll now like to hand over the session to Alok. And before I do that, let me just create the logistics. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, this session will go on for about 1 hour, and let's keep it as interactive as possible. So during the session, if you have any question, either post it in the questions panel, or you can just press the hand raise button, and at the right time, I'll unmute you and we'll have an open conversation. And and otherwise, you can just keep posting your questions, and we'll keep some time for an open Q&A during the last 10 to 15 minutes as well. So that's it regarding the logistics. Over to you, Alok. You can start the session now.
Thanks, Kapil. Thanks for the kind words. So welcome everyone, and thanks for joining the session. By and large, what I'm going to do today is speak out of some of our experience on the global e-commerce investments, and leave you with some thoughts and proposals on what the next set of e-commerce companies in India might look like. As Kapil mentioned earlier, I would love to make this interactive. So should you have thoughts, suggestions, questions anywhere during the course of the presentation, please feel free to raise your hand, and we'll try and incorporate that as soon as possible. I'll start off with a little bit of our introduction. We are a global fund. We operate across the US, Israel, and India. Largely in the venture capital category. Our typical point of investing in a company is what is referred to typically as Series A investments. For us, it means first institutional capital into the company, typically a $2 to $4 million check into technology companies. Technology for us is fairly broad. It includes, in the Indian context, consumer internet, outsourcing, software products, payment technology, and the like. We've been 27 years now into our business globally, 8 years in India, have an active portfolio of 13 companies in India. This is kind of the motivation why, I was chatting with a friend at digitalvidya, and what we saw in the US market was a lot of e-commerce investments till the year 2000, and then almost no investment till 2008. So e-commerce was being considered as a space that was done with. Amazon had appeared, many other category players like a Zappos had appeared, and it was largely believed that e-commerce now in form of stocking items and then selling them on the net was a business where venture capital had no scope. And then suddenly in 2009, 2010, one started seeing a wave of innovation, which brought new models and new customer experiences to the table. Over the last 3-4 years, Canaan has been a very active participant in this new wave of e-commerce in the US market. So some of the companies that I've listed here, in fact, most of the companies I've listed here are companies that we've invested in the last 3 to 4 years. Artspace, RealReal, Quail, One Fine Space, Apo, Napol in India, Gemvara, OpenSky, all these are our last 3 year investments in the e-commerce domain. Um, you know, as we look at what has happened in the US market and I look at some of what is going on in the Indian market, I am tempted to propose that the Indian market will start yielding similar innovation in the next year or two. And maybe through seminars such as this one, we can try and motivate some of you to think in this direction. So that's our context and our vantage point with which we want to share these experiences today. So what do we mean by e-commerce third wave, right? Broadly speaking, the first wave of e-commerce is what in India is represented by Flipkart, in the US context was represented by Amazon. Right? These are inventory-led models, and they are trying to build trust and infrastructure of e-commerce. Right? So they are trying to tell consumers that if you order online, you're not going to lose your money. Right? The goods will reach you in time. The quality of the goods will be as promised. Right? They're just doing the basics right, and hence taking the first lead in getting consumers online and transacting. So be it a Make My Trip in India, which developed comfort with payments and online ordering, or be it a Flipkart, which took that notion from travel to physical goods. I think over the last 7 or 8 years, 10 to 20 billion Indian shoppers have emerged, right? And that's the contribution that e-commerce 1.0 has made. I think the business model stress in e-commerce 1.0 is fairly evident now, right? Both in terms of capital intensity, but also in its limitations of enabling the wider selection for consumers. So now we are seeing, managed marketplaces, which are trying to build essentially supply-side scale, right? If inventory-based models could deliver you 100,000 SKUs, stock-keeping units, then e-commerce 2.0 promises to offer you 1 million or more items on the same service. eBay is the long-standing player in this space. In the Indian context, Flipkart is again moving in that direction. Snapdeal, ShopClose. There are multiple companies that are now trying to create marketplaces as both more capital-efficient models, but from a consumer standpoint, more importantly, a wider selection on offer. E-commerce 3.0, which is what we're going to walk through today, is all about differentiated experience. So, I would claim that there is still very little that has been done by way of providing shopping experiences online. My usage of both a Flipkart and an eBay or a Snapdeal is largely about, knowing what I want, going there, and then, clicking on the buy button, and hopefully through the COD mechanism get that good in time. So there is very little by way of saying, how do I sell travel differently from I sell books, or how do I sell books differently from the way I sell fashion. And I think the next wave of e-commerce is all going to be about how do we create these differentiated experiences, many times around specific targeted audiences, right? So the notion that you've got 10 million plus shoppers now means that you can start targeting the million shoppers that you want instead of necessarily trying to be a mass service. And we'll see some examples of this as we go forward. So one claim that I will lay on the table today is the lack of differentiated experiences, and that is what is going to drive the next wave of e-commerce. Second claim that I'm laying on the table is the Indian e-commerce landscape will graduate on the same broad premise that the US e-commerce landscape has evolved, right? And that is about providing these differentiated experiences. We will come to what the elements of this differentiation are slightly later in the presentation. So those are the two big claims that I'm laying on the table, which are both debatable, but form the premise of this webinar. So this is kind of the slide that captures, what we're going to spend the next 30, 40 minutes on, right? And these are 10 models that we believe are all examples of offering differentiated consumer experience and creating niche e-commerce businesses. And I say niche, these are still billion-dollar plus opportunities, but they are not necessarily trying to sell everything to everyone, right? So the services, and they want to sell everything under the sun to everyone under the sun. These businesses are making a conscious choice of what they want to sell, to whom do they want to sell, and what is the kind of experience they want to provide. So over the course of the next half hour, I will walk through this And then I will come back to some of our own Canaan view on what we find attractive within this melange. There are some of our companies embedded in this slide, and I'll talk to them with a little bit more credibility than I can talk to the rest of the industry. Wow. So, yeah, please go ahead. Is there a question? Okay.
No, Alok, there is no question. Yeah.
So the first model here, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with this and seen this in operation, are what are being called flash sites, right? These are services that are driven by limited inventory and a limited time period, right? So that's kind of one qualifying way to think about these. They are not about offering 1 million SKUs. They're about offering 20 SKUs, but only for the next 20 hours. And hence they introduce notion of gamification and entertainment into the shopping world. These models have by and large been adopted from the offline world. So if you think about Zara as a fashion brand, it had built itself around not a flash sale environment, but definitely a limited inventory environment, and they were able to successfully demonstrate that when consumers are faced with limited inventory, their instinct will drive them to buy now rather than not to buy. And multiple of these sites are now leveraging that consumer insight. This group is fairly famous. Zulily is another very interesting example in this space, which is focused largely on moms and babies. So fairly narrow space, but coming up with short-term offers and short-term merchandise on that. Hotel tonight, again, great example on this. On the hotel side, by definition, this is perishable inventory. So what I have today, I won't have tomorrow. And in that sense, last-minute deals become very important. We have our own company, the Real, that we'll talk about slightly later, which again is operating a flash sales business, but in a very different space. When you start to think of this from a consumer standpoint and how this is redefining the consumer experience, I think there are two key elements that they're bringing to the table. One is differentiated inventory. So there are many suppliers who will not want to put all of their inventory on sale all the time, but they're happy to do limited time sales on specific items, even items that are highly in demand, and hence these items can get to consumers through these e-commerce sites, right? So these flash sites can expose inventory which otherwise is not available on the mass retailers. The second thing that they are good at doing is the pricing arbitrage, right? So again, most suppliers are happy to offer these on a limited time sale rather than always on sale, and those represent opportunity for buyers to get these goods at a lower price. So really the defining factors of this model have been around specific inventory, limited time period, and the consumer proposition trending towards differentiated merchandise and net pricing opportunity. Yeah. The second model that has been fairly prominent is the group buying model, and I'll spend relatively little time on this because there are clearly companies in India that have tried this in various stages of development. This is obviously towards getting merchants access to a fresh base of consumers based on discounting. So the consumer proposition again is fairly clear. It is that you get offers and coupons and discounts. The merchant offer is will give you a new base of customers that you can amortize over the life of the customer. Challenging model from the point of view that most of these businesses have not necessarily been able to illustrate that they bring in high quality sticky customers. So there has been a challenge in this business with regards to deal seekers going to the platform again and again and going behind the merchant who has a deal to offer, rather than the merchant being able to acquire customers on a long-term basis. The next model, which is fairly interesting, is the subscription-based model, right? So here the notion is of taking items which are regular use items, right? So think about food, think about socks, think about your plain white shirt, think about makeup for women. All these are items that we replenish our wardrobes with every month, and very often with the same brands and the same goods. The subscription-based commerce sites make it easier for you to subscribe to these products and hence get a package in the mail every month, which will replenish your board. Many of these services will also send you related items, either as samples or just as part of the subscription. And the core of this business model is then based around how long the subscribers last. So, your conventional notions of customer lifetime value, cost of acquisition, and then amortizing that cost of acquisition over the life of the customer would be the typical metrics that these businesses get measured on. Some interesting examples on the chart here, Just which does shoes and handbags for women, Birchbox, which is more into beauty and lifestyle products. Again, if you start thinking at this from a consumer experience standpoint, really what this is bringing in is the convenience of purchasing, repeat purchase items on an ongoing basis. Right? So now I don't have to go and order my socks every 3 months. I've ordered it once. I don't really care about what socks I wear. This is not for you to look up my socks next time I'm with you, but I get my socks in mail every 3 months. So that's the customer convenience that these models are bringing in. So as you think about what businesses would be amenable here, think about categories which have repeated usage, not too much selection, ongoing selection part of the consumer, and an ability to influence the consumer purchase by sending them exciting stuff within that range. So that's the third model that has showed itself up in the last couple of years in the US market. The fourth one, which again is fairly prominent, is social shopping. And I think this is a little bit of a challenge term because at some level you could look at social as a horizontal that spans all the other models. Every other business on this chart wants to use social customer acquisition and the virality that is inherent to networks like Facebook. So the way we think about social shopping is being able to influence the shopping decision through social connection, right? Be it creation of content by experts, which then gets disseminated through the social media, or be it indeed using the community itself to generate content that then leads to sales. And one of the companies that we are invested in, OpenSky, which is mentioned in the next category below this, actually uses this the hill, right? What they do is they go and sign up celebs who will then pick a selection out of OpenSky catalog and adopt it, and then act as brand ambassadors just for that selection, right? So I could go out on this and say, I have found this great new note-taking application, right? And then people who trust me with my selection of note-taking application or business productivity in general might come and purchase the same product, right? Pinterest obviously is a big example in this space, which has triggered off visual shopping by creating pinboards around not just products but everything under the sun. List, another very interesting business which aggregates different fashion sites and then allows users to generate content around that. I think one of the companies in India which is experimenting with this a lot is LimeRoad, which again allows consumers to create fashion boards, right? To create looks out of individual fashion items and then to publish those looks through which other consumers can discover the product. The fourth one that I wanted to touch upon is the broad space of collaborative consumption. Right? This is about taking one person's boards and renting them to another person, right? So, Airbnb is a big example of that trend where I can lease out my couch for an evening to a traveler. Rent the runway is another interesting business which allows people to take fashion goods and be able to rent them. I'll again walk through One Fine Stay, which is a portfolio company of ours in the hospitality space, which is enabling collaborative consumption. So I think that is again one theme that is cutting across of identifying areas where there is no way of finding demand and then creating platforms which will allow that capacity to be discovered. And at some level, taxi models like Uber or Ola cabs in India are other good examples of collaborative consumption being applied to idle inventory. The next one is crowdsourcing. And I think that the inherent characteristic here really is that the community determines what gets produced, right? So you could look at building an engaged community of both enthusiasts and experts, and hence being able to change the consumer buying experience by providing exposure to that community. MyFab, which is one of the businesses that we have mentioned here, is again a high-end business. It's designer furniture directly from the factory, and one of the things that they do is let the community determine what gets manufactured by letting the community vote on design. Right, so they are taking this not just at the extent of saying I'm going to produce what I'm going to produce and then hopefully try and sell it to you, but letting consumers influence what gets produced and hence get early feedback on products, increase the chances of those successes in the product development space. The next broad category that I wanted to bring up is e-commerce, which is essentially all about personalization. Many of these businesses, and Zazzle and Cafe Press have been around for a while. It is kind of what Business Food was in and Myntra was in before they became a broad fashion destination. Allows customization of t-shirts, mugs, print your picture on it. But that concept is being now taken several steps forward. Jamvara is one of the companies that we put up here. It's a Canaan portfolio companies, and what they allow you to do is to do custom jewelry, right? So they allow you to combine 29 different kinds of gemstones and 9 different kinds of precious metals, and make those 29 into 9 combinations on any design that exists on the site, and then they have a supply chain which allows them to fulfill this range of products in an efficient manner. Zazzle, it does the same thing with customized clothing, and ours. So the key challenge in this business really comes around delivery, right? You have to structure your supply chain, almost become a manufacturer. It is not about bringing other people's goods online and selling them, but about creating a customization supply chain in the category that you choose. The big upside, of course, is delivering extreme personalization and hence improving on the customer experience. The next category is online brands. So again, these are people who will own the product categories and the merchandise and put their own label on it. Wankel out of China is a known example of this. Several companies in India, Share Singh and so on, which are adopting this model and essentially creating, great quality at half the price proposition by skipping all of the offline branding and distribution overhead. This again has been tried out in various categories. Apparels is one of them, as we discussed before, but Warby Parker does the same thing in glasses. Kuyana, again, which is a Canaan portfolio company, does this in exotic products, right? So they will source 200 handbags from Brazil and then put a Kuyana label on that and market it to, an intense followership base, right? So those people are looking at what is the next product Kuyana will bring to the market, and their brand promise essentially is we'll bring you exotic products from all over the world. So you can think about fairly niche and high value products that you could build online brands around. Of course, again, fulfilling, managing the merchandise mix, everything that a brand does, apart from necessarily selling offline, are key elements of these businesses. The other trend we are seeing in these businesses is to start opening offline experience stores. So I think the jury is out on whether these will be purely online brands or will they start exposing themselves to consumers in an offline experiential scenario, at least to develop an intimacy with the brand and then be able to go and order online. So many of these businesses are now in the process of setting up experience stores so that the customer can touch and feel the brand. The next category here is what we're calling pre-order, right? And this is essentially about saying, let me get the orders first, and then I will manufacture them on demand. So needless to say, these are prevalent in high value categories where you can afford to do, 1 order at a time or 10 orders at a time and not a mass supply chain. So some of the examples here are in the fashion designer product area. The key differentiation from a customer standpoint is the assortment. You can publish 100,000 designs because you're going to then manufacture only the 1,000 that you get orders for, and that too on demand. Furniture is another space that lends itself very well to this kind of a model. And the last tab that we put here is what we are calling e-commerce. Unlike collaborative consumption, which is largely about renting or gifting goods, e-commerce is about creating marketplaces for used products. And again, we will go through the example of the real, which we have significant experience with. One thing that has surprised us is that e-commerce is not just about lower prices. It is also about clearing up the supply, right? So if my wardrobe is full of goods that I don't want, many times I don't buy new items because my wardrobe is full. And these are not things that I would throw away. And e-commerce is creating an opportunity to free up that wardrobe, make space for new goods, and at the same time then make that wardrobe available to the secondary market. Of course, challenges include consumer behavior. There are many categories where people don't want to use used goods. And so one has to be careful about how the consumer behavior is shaped and how you trigger usage in some of these categories. So those are kind of the 10 bullets under the third wave, if you will, that I wanted to bring out. And I will go into some of the payment portfolio companies a little bit more in depth because we know their metrics, we know the challenges with them. But I just want to take a little bit of a breather here to see if there are any questions, suggestions around these 10 kind of business models on e-commerce.
Yeah, look, I have one question. eBay, for example, which is an online auction space, I'm assuming there will be somewhere in the collaborative consumption space, looking at the model that you presented. They entered into the Indian market long back, but if I look at the various PR going around in the e-commerce space, people actually talk about Flipkart, Snapdeal, and other players, but there's not much buzz around the eBay. So is that online auction space something that has not worked, or is it my perception? And like that, or what are the learnings out of that? If there's something you can share about.
I think two things, right? So one is eBay globally and even in India is probably one of the most robust marketplaces that does exist out there. So they have held a point of view which is towards a less managed marketplace rather than a more managed marketplace, and that trade-off potentially gives them a leg up on scalability of the business model. I think there are two things that you mentioned which are central to their business model and could act as constraining factors, which they are well aware of and have been looking to fix for a while. One is the auctions versus the fixed price model, right? And this really came up not in the Indian market, but in the 2006-07 time frame when Amazon sped ahead of eBay for the first time. Amazon had interestingly experimented with auction models under a different brand in the early 2000s. So eBay came back and said, auctions is just one of the things that we do, and we will start introducing fixed price because there's a large base of customers there who don't want uncertainty of the auction model. Right, so that is something that eBay has obviously started doing, and you can find fixed price now on an eBay site. The second thing that you mentioned was the comparison of eBay with a collaborative consumption model, and I have a slightly different point of view on that. I think eBay did start out with the notion of consumers selling to consumers. Over time, I'm seeing more and more of their economic activity being driven by merchants selling to consumers. So I think of them very much as what I was calling the second wave of marketplaces, rather than collaborative consumption where consumers bring inventory online. And my comment is not much in the direction of saying, can consumers bring inventory online or not? Sure, they can do that on eBay. But really, bulk of the usage that I see happening is around merchants bringing inventory online and consumers buying that. So I think the collaborative consumption thesis is very different from that and requires a very different supply enablement system than what companies like eBay would adopt. So eBay obviously has seller development teams which focus on these merchants, on the merchandise mix that exists on the site. Whereas in a collaborative consumption space, you are essentially going after the couch in my house, right? So I think those two models are somewhat different as far as I understand.
Got it. Great. So there's a couple of questions from the audience. Junaid Ahmed, he wants to know, what do you think of e-commerce model in India for a startup in electronics domain?
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting model, and we've seen a couple of companies in India that are trying to address that. I think the challenge in the electronic space per se is the sharp depreciation in the value of goods, right? The phone which is 10,000 rupees today will end up being 3,000 rupees tomorrow. And in the duration that it is sitting on my shelf, it might lose further 1,000 rupees of value, right? So if you're going to create an e-commerce model on things like mobile phones, you need to figure out a way of rotating the inventory really, really fast. And when I say really fast, I'm talking a matter of days, not a matter of weeks, because the value loss sitting on the shelf can be fairly significant. Whether that loss is absorbed by you or the consumer, the seller consumer, is a secondary issue. But in the whole value chain, you can lose significant value there. In the broader electronic space, I think this model has a lot of potential, and what Green does is one company which is trying to create that supply chain of taking items which are used items or out of production items, refurbishing them, and then bringing them back to the market. So if you start looking at now not mobile phones but refrigerators, right? And yeah, I'm stretching that to fit the definition of electronics now. But the product life cycles in that category are far longer, right? The value depreciation is more gradual, and at least you don't risk significant drop in value, in a month or two that the item is sitting on the shelf. So I think that's one element to think about carefully, of how quickly does value deteriorate, and does that have a significant impact on your economic model, because you're paying for every day that the item is sitting on the shelf. But certainly from a user adoption standpoint, from a consumer standpoint, I do think there is a lot of value to it, because India is a market where the whole pyramid is built, right? So you can find people who want to buy a cell phone for 10,000 rupees. You can find people who want to buy one for 4,000 rupees. You can find someone who wants to buy a phone for 1,000 rupees. So yeah, I wouldn't think hard about loss of value and technology of services. And if you feel comfortable with those factors, it might be an interesting marketing look at.
Great. There's many questions are coming up now. So Abhishek wants to know any information about coupon e-commerce model, which is very famous in US. In India, what is your view?
I missed the question. Please repeat it.
Yeah, any information about coupon e-commerce?
Yeah. So we do a bunch of that. There's a company called Performance Marketing Brand that you might have seen earlier, and they do precisely offers. I think the space has expanded, right? So earlier there used to be different ways of extending offers to customers. Like coupons is one way of extending offers to customers. Rebates is another one. You mail in a card and then you get a rebate, and so on. I think most of them are getting now bundled inside one umbrella. There is consolidation in the space to say all kind of customer offers can be housed inside the same business, because the data and the analytics that you drive to get to those offers, whom to target what where, are common across these. So for example, what PMD has ended up doing is their organic business with rebates. They've acquired couponing businesses, and now they operate a single data analytics engine to drive all the insights around who can potentially buy what and what rebates or coupons should I offer them. The challenge in this business is how do you land up not just becoming an affiliate, right? And what I mean by an affiliate is you acquire each one of your from the Google search engine for a certain cost. You make some arbitrage and then you sell it to the merchant, right? So you can do that. You can say, I got a $3 spread in this transaction. Let me pass $2 of that back to the consumer. It's very hard to build that value by reacquiring the same users again and again, right? So what is the hypothesis in the business model which will allow you to retain customers where they then start coming to you instead of going to either the merchant or Google directly for their next purchase is the key question to answer. And at least through PMB, what our experience tells is a lot of that is centered around your data analytics and what consumer insights can you bring to the table, which prompt the users to come back to you before they even realize they want to go to a Google or merchant.
Great. Okay, and the next question is from Prasun. He wants to know, in spite of billion-dollar turnovers of all Indian e-commerce players, majority of them, including Flipkart and Snapdeal, but they have actually significant bottom line losses, but they have achieved valuation. So is that the current idea? That's where the e-commerce is heading towards, or what's your views on that?
Yeah, I like to separate this discussion on the Flipkart and the Snapdeals into two different distinct parts, right? And I think there is one part that we worry about a lot that we should perhaps worry less about, and there's another part which we should worry more about. So the first part that we worry a lot about is how are they getting value, right? Now, honestly, that at some level is a low stakes business, right? What is going to happen? Whosoever is invested in that company, and let me not take someone else's company, let me take my company, NASSCOM, right? Canaan might lose money on NASSCOM, right? Big deal. How does it matter, right? So yeah, maybe I'm undervaluing it, maybe I'm overvaluing it. That in my mind, that's a less consequential discussion, right? And I'll come back to that part again. I don't mean to dismiss that question. I think the more consequential discussion is what is the change in behavior that those businesses have created in their consumers over the last 5 years, right? So I was counting my own purchases, and in the last 5 odd years, and I don't order big items of e-commerce. I order small items of e-commerce, books, gifts, stuff like that. And with one of the sites that you mentioned, my last 2 years purchases are close to 10,000 rupees. Each order might have been less than 500 rupees, right? With another site that we discussed, I have ordered in excess of 25,000 rupees in the last 2 years, right? Now, that is the change in behavior, and that is the customer value that is getting created and captured by these businesses. So I think the reason why they get valued like they do is because of that followership and that change in customer behavior that they have created. The bet that is still outstanding is that if they do enough of that, they will have the margin leverage at some point in time. The example which inspires that confidence is Amazon, right? They burned to $400 million before they made a penny of profit, and they made a penny of profit because in 2002 they were running out of options to raise money. Otherwise, left to themselves, they would have loved to expand faster and not make money for a while. So I think valuation is, one needs to understand why they're getting valued so that one can either learn or not from that. But I think the real value that is being built here is 10 million transacting customers who feel comfortable coming every second week to them and ordering, and that is the trust factor that the brand has created. And today when they charge me 40 rupees incremental shipping fee, I don't blink an eyelid. Right? So the margin leverage, in my personal view, does exist at that scale. If you look at what is the effect that Amazon has had on the global publishing industry, it by and large controls it, right? And not just because of the book publishing business, but because of the Kindle business now. So I think what margin they want to extract and retain for themselves today is their prerogative, rather than what the industry lets them make. So I do believe in this valuation, but honestly, I believe in them because consumers believe in them.
By the way, since we are talking about Flipkart and Snapdeal, so I wanted to ask you a question on the lighter note. Most of these e-commerce companies have their founder's last name as Bansal. So it looks like they're shaping up as the Jews of US in India. So when some e-commerce entrepreneur comes to you with the last name Bansal, does that triggers a bell? Is it becoming like a litmus test in VC community also?
No, the first thing that I check is whether they have had a name change or not. So at this stage, I'm sure at some point people will start changing their names. So, on the lighter note, but it's certainly interesting, yeah.
Okay, great. So there's a lot of questions coming up. So should we start as continue with the Q&A, or how do you suggest?
Yeah, I think we should do that. Just maybe I'll take 5 minutes to conclude the presentation. So I think the part that you need to be careful on these businesses is you don't want to stock anything that Amazon can stock and sell equally, right? And that is the litmus test. You can replace Amazon by Flipkart. And that's a litmus test to A, are you getting unique SKUs, which is one thing that can drive consumer experience, or are you creating an innovation in the buying process, customer experience again, which other sites cannot easily replicate. So, I would be obsessive about these elements. Otherwise, many other businesses which look like they are differentiated early on, just get taken over by the broad horizontal retailers. So that was kind of the limited point here. This slide kind of talks to a little bit about what is Canaan looking for in India. So high margin categories with sustained customer differentiation, right? And the next 3 bullets kind of mention what could create sustained differentiation. I will skip going through our portfolio just in interest of time and making sure we can take more questions. You are welcome to look at some of these, and if there are questions later about some distinctive elements in each of these, I'll be happy to chat about that. But I think one of the things you will notice is, in the e-commerce world, a lot of focus is around discounts and pricing. Right, you will see a lot of concentration in our portfolio on the high-end marketplace. So the real is all about consignment goods at the top end of the fashion marketplace. Jambara is jewelry, One Fine Stays, boutique hotels, again, $500 or more per room night. Art Space is about designer art. Borrow is about lending against a Ferrari. So you will see that there's a lot of these businesses that are targeted towards the high end of the market and not necessarily discounting. And again, that is one opportunity that I have seen entrepreneurs think relatively less about in the Indian context. I'm personally very excited about an e-commerce business that will just target the top 10 million households in the country and no one else. And I think if you start building some services around that target consumer, you would build them very differently from what a Flipkart or a Snapdeal would do to a their business. So again, by way of consumer segment, something to think about. And perhaps an area which is under-innovated on today. So Kapil, I'll skip the rest of the slides and just focus on answering some of the questions that are coming up.
Yeah, I think that would be good. So guys, post as many questions as you want. So I'm picking up some of the questions that were earlier posted. There's a question by Srijit. He wants to know, from the consumer behavior standpoint, is there a difference between e-commerce in product vis-a-vis that of service?
Yeah, I think the key barrier to consumers transacting has been trust, right? And the mechanism of building trust in a product versus a services play has been different, right? So if you start looking at travel marketplaces, for example, which were the first ones to take off in the Indian context, there was a lot of trust that was coming from the underlying brand, right? So ultimately, I was buying a jet ticket. So I had no experience expectation with the make my trip, right? As long as they concluded the transaction, and since it had electronic delivery, all that meant was take my payment and make sure you send me the ticket, right? So within 5 minutes, I would know whether the transaction concluded successfully or not. I was fine, right? I had no further risk on the brand as far as make my trip was concerned. In the product scenario, in many respects, I'm taking the risk on the brand, so I'm still buying a Samsung phone, right? But my experience with the retailer is far more stretched out, right? So it is a 1 week experience with the retailer and not a 1 minute experience with the retailer. So I want to make sure my payment goes well. I want to make sure the delivery happens on time. I want to make sure the goods came as promised. I want to make sure that if I need to return goods, then that is well taken care of, right? So just the touch points and the opportunities for an error go up. and to that extent, it requires a higher degree of confidence in the retailer itself beyond what the product brand is. As you get to some unstructured categories, let's think about now, furniture. Let's think about groceries, right? I think the level of trust required is even more, because now you're also relying on the retailer for the underlying product. Right? Because the underlying product is not branded, right? I want to make sure that if I order tomatoes and you delivered me tomatoes, they were of the right quality. So I think progressively, these elements of trust become more and more challenging, and that's part of the reason why you will see, the third wave coming after the first wave, because the issues of trust related to the first wave have been addressed. Today, there are 10 million consumers in India who feel comfortable going to a site, ordering online, and have reasonable amount of comfort that the good will get delivered in the right shape, form, in the right amount of time, right? If that trust was not developed, talking about e-commerce would have been very premature, right? So in some sense, we are kind of, standing on shoulders of the first and the second wave when we talk about some of these new models come up. So yes, the challenges are different, and they require, progressively new problems to be solved and new elements of trust to be reinstated.
Okay, Srijit has just mentioned, in the continuation of this, about the health services. Any particular view on health services? Yeah.
So is Srijit from one of the healthcare portals, or?
Maybe.
Okay. So I think, I think healthcare starts with a little bit of advantage, right? I think the trust deficit in the offline world is fairly high. And for a moment, I'm on pharmacy and I'll come back to the category. Right? So today, when I walk into an unorganized retailer, let's forget about the limited number of outlets that a 98.4 has, right? For most of the country, we walk into an unorganized chemist, right? Mittal pharmacy, right? And you walk into that, people are concerned about, are they getting the right quality of goods or not, right? So I think the online mechanism can actually be a great, trust builder for the category itself, by just making sure that genuine goods are being delivered, of course, on time, for the right price, the threshold factors are taken care of. So I think there is an opportunity there. Some other challenges, like how do you acquire customers, how do you acquire subscriptions, will require custom solves, which I don't think current players have figured out. The one opportunity that is very exciting, and sorry to use that term in context of healthcare, for me is the overlap of healthcare and subscription-based commerce, right? Which is essentially talking about disease management and chronic conditions. Right? For better or worse, India is the chronic disease capital of the world, right? Diabetes, asthma, cardiac, and chronic diseases mean you never cure the disease, you only manage the disease, which means that unfortunately fell under the condition for the next 40 years of life. I am, working towards managing the disease, not just in medical terms, but in social terms, in personal terms, and there are no services that today allow me to do that. So I think there is a big opportunity there. It is about picking up niche audiences. It's not about saying I'm going to solve for acute healthcare, I'm going to solve for chronic, and then chronic I'm going to solve across all the 5 big chronic diseases at the same time. It is about saying, if you just have to focus on a diabetes patient, right, who has 30 years of expected life ahead of him and needs to manage this disease, needs to be in touch with whatever is the latest innovation happening, needs to get coupons, offers, discounts because dialysis is a recurring treatment for him after, what is the service you would design for them? And so I think that is one space that personally for me is intriguing when you bring together subscription commerce with the healthcare opportunity.
Great. By the way, Srijit said he said that he is from healthworld.in. Okay. Another question is from Haridas. He wants to know, what do you think mobile sites play a role for online shopping, and how much percentage?
Sorry, what was the second one? And what?
And how much percentage?
Sure.
I think it's, yeah.
So I think what we are hearing back from most retailers across travel and non-travel is 30% plus of their traffic is going to come from the mobile side. The rate of transactions is very variable. There are businesses which are generating less than 5% to businesses that are generating 30% of their transactions on the mobile phone. And I think there are one or two different factors on which this depends, right? So one is, smaller value recurring purchases like this, for example, relatively easier for consumers to get done on the mobile phone because they are directed purchases. You're not trying to figure out what to buy. This is what I'm buying. It's a standardized product. I can order it quickly. The second is whether that product falls for electronic payment on the mobile phone, or is there a mechanism like cash on delivery? The fall-off in the mobile payments user flow is still very high. So businesses that are looking to conclude a credit card or a debit card transaction on the mobile are facing significant drop rates. So I think those two factors are by and large determining where businesses are falling on that 5 to 30% mobile transaction rate. But almost uniformly across businesses, we are seeing 30% plus usage coming now from mobile phone. Of course, in context of the overall market, commerce and non-commerce, mobile now dominates the usage, right? So 50% plus of the usage from India comes from mobile phone. But that includes search, social networks, all of that.
Got that. So mobile can't be ignored. So I'm taking up more questions. A lot of you are asking me, please take my questions. So I'm just taking all the questions in chronological order. Simultaneously, I'm just launched this poll in front of you. In case you're interested in any formal course in digital marketing, just press yes over here. So the next question is from Ritesh. Interesting one. He wants to know whether the e-commerce model should be based on lower price or e-commerce can charge premium rates. So which model would be more appropriate in recent times?
Yeah. So I think there are two ways of looking at it. So I'm going back to this slide on what are the sustainably differentiated experiences, right? Because you can land up creating what is differentiated today, but might not be differentiated 12 months from now. So I think these are the three things that I see, can cause sustainable differentiation, and all of these have significant back-end implications, right? So unique SKU, right? Having merchandise that other people can't get. It could be because you've gone deep into the supply chain to source those. It could be because you are in the collaborative consumption space and you've created this base of sellers which is not accessible to other competitors. The second could be structural pricing advantage. And I was very careful in putting the word structural here. Because if you are just lowering your price and you have the same cost structure as everyone else, all that means is you're going to die sooner than everyone else. What gets interesting is if you got a cost structure advantage, that then you can decide whether you want to pass to the consumer or not, or to what extent. So it's important that when you consider pricing advantages, you're not just looking at a pricing trade-off, but do you really have something in your delivery chain which allows you to have a far lower cost structure on a sustainable basis than other players do. And the third is the buying process innovation itself, right? Can I go try a product? How do I return? Are there categories like jewelry where I don't just look at the product and purchase, but I need, other evidence and trust reinforcers to make the purchase happen. So I think those are the three broad ones, and you could be centered around, any of those. And for example, I think the large part of the social shopping category is not relying on low prices as the primary value proposition. A large part of personalization-oriented businesses are not relying on lower prices. Sometimes they can be higher prices, but normally these services are not available in your neighborhood store. So yeah, theoretically they're high prices, but you're competing against non-availability. So I don't have a philosophical bias on should it be pricing based or not. My only philosophical bias is if it is going to be pricing based, then you better have a structural cost advantage, and it is not just about making lower margin relative to the rest of it.
So the next question is from Sanjay. He wants to know how much do you see customer loyalty in this space? What are the differentiator in that regard?
So I think it's a function of a few things, right? So one, when you measure customer loyalty on books versus customer loyalty on purchasing, a car, right? Those will inherently be different. So I'm assuming you're thinking about, some normalized notion like a net promoter score or something of that sort, because the opportunity to purchase is just so different that the repeat purchase numbers will look very different. So the notion of if I needed to buy something again, would I go to the same business again or not, is certainly very important. Most of the economics of these businesses are driven by that. So the lifetime economics certainly need to be making sense. And I think by and large the venture industry gravitates towards saying you should be able to recover all of the customer acquisition costs to the first year of purchases, and you should be able to make at least 3 times the customer acquisition cost to the life of the customer, which is typically 3 years or less. So I think those factors are fairly important. I think it's also been shown that price by itself does not lead to customer loyalty, right? So it is something in the experience, the trust factor that you create or the merchandise that you create that keeps people coming back to you. In the same category, it's been shown that some businesses can generate far higher degree of customer loyalty just through product innovation than others. So in the travel space, if you start looking at something like Fairchase, which Microsoft acquired, right? They created a pricing discovery proposition, not even offering the price, just price discovery proposition, which was very distinct from the rest of the industry. It got people to go back again and again to them to just use their offering, which was price discovery. If you start looking at Zillow, right? Suddenly the real estate market created a very different hook for people to come back, right? So I think this is something which is not extraneous to your business. It is very much part of your business and your model of saying, how will I get consumers to come back to me again and again? And should there be an opportunity to purchase, buy from me? Pricing is unlikely to be the single most important driver of that. I think data and analytics is becoming a big driver of that at scale. So just your ability to suggest what else the consumer can buy from you is becoming an important element.
Got it. Another interesting dimension which posed by Sir Boni Sarkar. The question is, don't you think that the e-commerce market is more popular among the youth? They are tech savvy and they do not really cater to other groups in the society. And moreover, can they only operate in urban market? What about rural market? And so how do you deal with this challenge if this is a challenge? So tech savvy versus not tech savvy, rural versus urban, is the e-commerce spreading everywhere, or like what is your opinion about?
Yeah, I think this is classic disruptions behave in this manner, right? They will start with a niche, but they will start with a niche where the trend is a friend, right? So you know where this is headed. In the next 10 years, there will be 36 crore younger people coming into, the work environment, right? All these people are going to be on the mobile phone or on the internet, right? All these people will be born up with a Flipkart in front of them, not like me who was born with no internet in front of me. So their comfort level with transacting online will be far higher, right? And at some point, this balance will tip, right? So this is the classic model of disruption. You start with a niche, but start with a niche that is going to take over the rest of the world at some point in time. So there I agree. And I think the burden on the entrepreneur is to define how they're going to address these waves in progression, right? Today, if you start your e-commerce business, should you be worrying about people sitting in the rural area who one day will be online? Not sure, right? Again, depends on what your investment capability is. But today, if you start a business which is focused on 30 to 40-year-olds making a lot of money, familiar with the internet, not afraid of doing a 3,000 rupee transaction online, and then you have a roadmap to saying, in 2 or 3 years' time, this is how I want to expand my customer base, that is another way to address the same opportunity, right? So I think there is a strategic question here of how big an audience do you want to get to. So, again, Flipkart is our favorite company, right? So I was having a discussion with them a couple of weeks back, and the way they described it to me, which was very interesting for me personally, was when we were in 2010, right? We used to look at our addressable market over the next 5 years as 10 million people, right? And that is how our product selection would be based. That is how our marketing would be based. All of it, right? We were talking to them. Today, they see 100 million people as their audience in the next 5 years, right? So today, their marketing, their merchandising will address that audience. They already have a few million users, right? So it is a ever-expanding envelope, and your capability to invest ahead of the curve will determine how far out in the future you want to go. There is sometimes no merit of going too far out in the future, right? So I would not think in my mind of going 5 years out. I would say let me address 3 years out as my target base, who I'm going to understand, serve, and talk to marketing today.
Great. So, guys, it's already 4:04. We'll take just last 2-3 questions and try to ensure that all the questions are getting addressed in some way or other. So another question is actually posed by Gopal Gupta, and he wants to know what are the legal compliances in an e-commerce business. So if you can throw some light on that, that would be good.
So again, I will not claim to be an expert at this one. We have some exposure to this through investment that we've made. It is a maze. So obviously there are all the corporate compliances that you need to take, but given that we are not in a GST regime, just the taxation, the indirect taxation part is fairly onerous. It also depends on whether you stock inventory or not. So if you are a pure marketplace, some of those challenges go away. Relative to if you are getting items into your warehouse, repackaging them, and then sending them out. And then there is a set of compliances which are on the payment side of the business, depending on, again, what payment model you adopt. If you just have a payment gateway, third-party payment gateway that you're using, that's the simplest case. But if you want to start developing your capabilities in terms of one-click ordering and the like, then there is a set of compliances on that side. So it's a fairly intense topic. I would almost suggest to Kapil that if this is of interest, then there might be a separate session with someone who understands this well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Got it. So another question is from Nandita. She wants to know, in an online publication space in India, is there somebody who is doing noticeably well?
In online publication?
Right.
Kapil, was it online publication?
Yes, it's online publications in India.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of publishing businesses, and I think of them more along independent publisher notion. But no, I haven't seen anything which stands out, right? And I'm assuming the question is more about book publishing. There are businesses like Canberra, for example, which would publish a photo book. But on the conventional publishing side of the business, I haven't seen anything which has sprung up to any degree of significance.
Great. Guys, I think we've already exceeded 6 minutes, so thanks a lot for participation, and really want to thank Alok for his time.